Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. M.N. Gupta, Emeritus Professor from Department of Biochemical Engineering and Biotechnology at Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. Today we are going to talk on the second module on biomembranes called Biomembranes 2 from paper Structure and Function of Biomolecules 2. We view proteins as water-soluble globular proteins with the hydrophobic amino acids getting buried inside. These are the proteins which we mostly study and are familiar with. For example, well-known hydrolases such as chymotrypsin and trypsin, two very well characterized proteins structurally and biochemically. So, given that restricted versions of the proteins, it becomes difficult for us to reconcile this with the coexistence of proteins with lipids in biomembranes. That was the main challenge conceptually in trying to visualize how lipids and proteins can coexist in these biomembranes. So what comes out is that their coexistence is the result of mutual adjustments. Lipids become slightly polar. They have some polar components. And proteins organize themselves in such a way as to present their hydrophobic surface to the lipophilic milieu of these biomembranes. So the objectives of this module are to learn about our early notions regarding role of proteins in biomembranes, to learn about three different kinds of proteins: peripheral, integral and lipid linked. We will in this module also focus on the structure of some important integral proteins which are fairly well characterized now, namely glycophorin, bacteriorhodopsin and photosynthetic reaction center. We will also learn about how lipids are linked to the proteins and general location of such lipid linked proteins. So the concept map is all about membrane proteins, peripheral, integral and lipid linked, and talking in more detail about integral proteins to look at glycophorin, bacteriorhodopsin and bacterial photosynthetic center. It was a matter of slow realization that many biological processes occur at membranes. Transport processes were the early focus. Later it was found that even many metabolic processes like photosynthesis and oxidative phosphorylation involve membranes. Most of our tools to characterize biological molecules, especially proteins, were suited to deal with samples in aqueous solutions. Characterizing solid samples was and continues to be a little bit more challenging. So, electron microscopy was valuable in looking at proteins in membranes. It was the concept of homeostasis initially given by Claude Bernard in relation to blood and lymph in higher animals, which constituted milieu interieur, that's internal milieu. It refers to the, quote, constancy of the internal environment, unquote. It is in the context of concentrations of inorganic cations and anions both inside and outside cells, their homeostasis, that membranes attracted initial attention from physiologists and biochemists. In that era, the concept of membranes as semi-permeable membranes, which allow some species to move across them, was introduced. That these membranes consisted of proteins and lipids was known. Practically, not much was known about the proteins of the membranes. Again, it is the pursuit of understanding how relative concentrations of sodium and potassium ions are maintained inside the cell that involvement of a protein acting as the pump was identified. It's interesting to recall that a 1968 textbook mentions that, quote, the enzyme cannot be separated from the lipid matrix of the cell with the retention of these properties. Accordingly, the protein is thought to exist as a lipoprotein in lipid matrix, quote. The main worry was the ability of proteins to interact with lipids. We did not know enough about the protein structure of these membrane proteins. As we have mentioned before, their isolation and purification in active forms was not easy, especially in those early days. Another membrane protein which attracted attention was E. coli permease, which was part of Monod's lac operant model. Kennedy isolated a protein from membrane fraction of E. coli cells induced by thiogalactoside. This protein showed appropriate binding affinity for the galactosides. Even with the meager tools, the biochemist nevertheless had classified transport processes into active and passive ones. Also, conformational changes and phosphorylation and dephosphorylation were being implicated in the role of proteins in transport across membranes. Eventually, as tools to look at membranes developed, and enzymologists learned how to isolate and characterize proteins associated with membranes, a broad classification emerged. Integral or intrinsic proteins are firmly bound to the other components of the membranes, that is lipids, by hydrophobic interaction. While no covalent bonds are involved, the hydrophobic milieu ensures that this binding is quite strong. Organic solvents, detergents like STS or Triton X100 or even chiotropic compounds can be used to disturb the membrane structure, and hence these help in releasing such proteins. Chiotropic compounds or ions are substances which disturb the water structure and facilitate interaction between nonpolar substances and water, thereby enhancing solubility of the former. Guanidinium chloride and urea in the range of 5 to 10 molar are good chiotrops in nature. Once released, these integral proteins tend to aggregate extensively and form precipitates. To prevent that, these are generally kept in solution by using detergents or water miscible organic solvents. The use of butanol in protein extraction in classical enzymology was an empirical approach, the basis for which is clear now. These integral proteins are seldom completely buried inside the membrane. These normally have three components. One is the extracellular one and the second is the cytoplasmic one. It is the middle component which interacts with the membrane, hence the word transmembrane proteins is sometimes used for such proteins. Many proteins are bound to membranes weakly. This originates in the fact that their interactions are linked to the exterior part of the membranes. Washing with buffers of appropriate pH and ionic strength releases these proteins. Peripheral proteins do not interact predominantly by hydrophobic interactions. Hence, their surfaces are not extensively hydrophobic. Thus, once extracted, these are soluble in aqueous buffers. These are comparatively easy to work with. In many cases, peripheral proteins interact with outer part of the integral proteins through hydrogen bonding or electrostatic interactions. Cytochrome C is the example, which is a familiar protein. Cytochrome C, as you may remember, is a part of the respiratory chain. As a peripheral protein, it is associated with the outer surface of the inner mitochondrial membrane. Some proteins are anchored to the membrane by being a lipoprotein. The lipid is covalently conjugated to the protein at post-translational covalent modification step. Lipid, like any other conjugated structure, affects the structure and function of the proteins. It mediates the interaction of proteins with the milieu. It also mediates the interaction with other proteins. There are three kinds of lipid-linked proteins: prenylated proteins, fatty acid acylated proteins, and glycosyl phosphatidyl inositol linked proteins. In some cases, more than one kind of a lipid molecule is linked to the protein molecule. There are two ways an integral or transmembrane protein is present in association with the membranes. In the first mode, the polypeptide chain crosses through the membrane interior only once. In such cases, we talk of hydrophilic N-terminal, C-terminal, and the hydrophobic transmembrane part. The transmembrane part is almost always a transmembrane helix. Such amphiphilic proteins have the functional globular domain at the either end of the protein. Such domains can often be obtained undisturbed in their structure by proteolytic cleavage. Hemagglutinin and neuraminidase, components of the influenza virus, and HLA proteins are well-known examples of such functional entities obtained by such proteolytic cleavages. In order to understand this, it may be useful to recollect fundamental notions of domains in protein structures. As fine structures of many proteins came to be known from X-ray diffraction studies, it was realized that few types of secondary structures often occur in combination in the same way in many proteins. Such arrangements are called supersecondary structures of motifs. In some cases, even a single motif is responsible for a specific function. In other cases, it is part of larger functional assembly. Domains can be considered a unit of tertiary structure. It is a part of the polypeptide chain that can independently fold into a stable tertiary level structure. In many cases, domains are capable hence of an independent function. A protein may contain one domain or often several domains. A good analogy will be to view protein molecules as obeying federal form of the governance. The protein has a federal structure, domains akin to the state or regional governments, geographically, that is structurally separated and functionally independent in many ways, are integral part of the protein. Another kind of integral protein has a different kind of association with the membrane. In such cases, the polypeptide chain crosses the membrane several times. The protein in such cases has three kinds of parts. Both the N-terminal and C-terminal are hydrophilic, just like in the first kind of membrane proteins. The novel hydrophilic components are loops, which stick out as the transmembrane protein emerges out of and re-enters the membranes. The loop may be a simple one or a bunch of loops. All permutation and combinations are known. In such cases, proteolytic cleavage almost never produces the functional domains. Understandably, many fragments of different sizes can be obtained. Human erythrocyte glycophorin A is an example of a well-studied integral protein. Three clear domains can be identified in this protein, whose structure is shown here. The N-terminal domain has 72 amino acid residues and is heavily glycosylated with 16 oligosaccharide chains. Out of these, 15 are O-linked and 1 is N-linked oligosaccharide. The transmembrane part of this protein has 19 amino acid residues. Almost all of this membrane spanning segment consists of hydrophobic amino acids. There is not even a single amino acid with a charged side chain. There is a single threonine, but it is flanked by two of the most hydrophobic amino acids, isoleucine and leucine. The cytoplasmic C-terminal has many amino acids which are acidic and basic. Again, whenever there is an occasional hydrophobic amino acid like at 98 and 99, which are leucine and isoleucine, the amino acids preceding these are 2-arginine and lysine each. In fact, two variants of glycophorins are known. Glycophorin A M has serine and glycine, whereas glycophorin A N has leucine and glutamic acid at positions 1 and 5 respectively, which are of course part of external N-terminal domain. As we deal with few more integral proteins, we will see that transmembrane part of such proteins is helical at least in part. So, such proteins have either alpha 1 helix or several in their transmembrane parts. Presence of alpha helix in such cases can be predicted by computing the free energy change in transferring the amino acid segment from the interior of the membrane to water. The delta G higher than plus 85 kilojoules per mole suggested the possibility of alpha helix formation. Among the amino acid side chains, alanine, glutamate, leucine, methionine promote alpha helix formation. On the other hand, proline, glycine, tyrosine and serine are poor in forming alpha helix. However, this information alone leads to poor prediction about alpha helix formation. The most favored position of alpha helix is on the outside of a protein structure. In such a situation, one side of the alpha helix faces exterior, while other side faces the hydrophobic interior of the protein. Hence, it is not surprising that transmembrane segments prefer alpha helix formation. By its very design, one side of the helix anyway has a thermodynamically stable existence. Alpha helices can be also completely buried in such cases or partially buried. This table shows amino acid sequences from 3 helices present in different proteins. The first one, 260 to 270 segment from citrate synthase, forms a completely buried helix. The second is from amino acid number 355 to 365, is a segment from alcohol dehydrogenase and represents a partially buried helix. The troponin C sequence, consisting of residues from 87th to 97th, forms a helix which is completely exposed. This behavior of alpha helix to coexist with hydrophilic and hydrophobic surroundings originates in its own design. The peptide bond, as shown on the left hand side, has a dipole moment with fractional charges on the atoms of the peptide units. The dipoles of these peptide units are aligned along the axis of the alpha helix. The alpha helix has 3 to 6 residues per turn. So, with a periodicity of every 3 to 4 residues, Side chains tend to change from hydrophobic to hydrophilic. Keeping in mind that each turn is 3.6 amino acid residues long, each residue can be plotted as part of concentric circles forming the spiral at 100 degree. This kind of a plot displays position of the residue on a plane perpendicular to the alpha helix axis. In case of ADH, it is clear that one side of the alpha helix has hydrophilic residues and the other side has hydrophobic residues. This is in line with the fact that the then alpha helix is partially exposed. With citrate synthase, predominantly hydrophobic character is obvious. In case of troponin C, the helix has all polar amino acids and the helix is completely exposed to hydrophilic milieu. Before we go any further, it is useful to take this discussion further and try to understand why in some cases several helices occur as a part of the transmembrane segment of the membrane proteins. In fact, such alpha domain structures are quite common. As indicated earlier, these consist of a bundle of alpha helices with a loop connecting these alpha helices. Alpha helices in fact favor structures in which these coexist. A very common occurrence is 4 helix bundle. When such bundles exist, the adjacent alpha helix are usually antiparallel with respect to each other. This arrangement leads to a hydrophobic core in the middle of the bundle along its length. The side chains facing inwards exclude water. Mild detergents like octyl glucoside solubilize membrane proteins in their native conformation. Such protein detergent complexes consist of hydrophilic part of the detergent forming the surface, as it is the hydrophobic part which combines with the hydrophobic surface of the membrane proteins. Such protein detergent complexes have proven useful for both purification and crystallization of membrane proteins. For crystallization, a suitable amphipathic molecule, which is identified by a hit and trial method, is added to the protein detergent complexes. Apparently, this molecule facilitates the necessary packing interactions in the crystal. Some of the early membrane proteins which could be obtained in big enough crystal sizes for X-ray diffraction are outer membrane proteins from E. coli called porine, an enzyme prostaglandin synthase, and photosynthetic reaction centers. The photosynthetic reaction centers from two bacterial species called Rhodopseudomonas viridis and Rhodobacter spheroides. Thus, while glycophorin was the first transmembrane protein to be sequenced, the detailed picture about higher order structure of a membrane protein came from higher resolution. Electron microscopy of two-dimensional crystals. Such crystalline sheets are easier to obtain. In many cases, they are present as such in vivo. Rhodopsin from a purple bacteria, Halobacterium halobium, is a membrane protein and is called bacteriorhodopsin. The bacterium has been extensively studied in the context of photosynthesis. This protein occurs as an ordered sheet. Henderson and Unwin at MRC Cambridge looked at bacteriorhodopsin by tilted low-dose electron microscopy. The high-resolution technique enabled them to construct 3D images from such two-dimensional samples. This excellent work had two important implications. Firstly, it discovered 7 transmembrane helices. Their later work in 1989 at 3 angstrom resolution confirmed and gave a very clear picture of the 7 helical structures. These studies in fact were the first ones to provide the experimental proof that our predictive models to predict helices based upon amino acid sequences were quite good. The technique later on was used to obtain similar information about acetylcholine receptor, ion pumps, gap junctions, and cytochrome oxidase. We had earlier mentioned the propensity of the alpha helices to form helix bundle structures. The 7 helix bacteriorhodopsin is actually a light driven proton pump. The cell membrane has about 0.5 micrometer wide patches and contains 75% rhodopsin and 25% lipid. The helices of the protein are about 25 amino acid rods spanning the bilayer of the lipids in an almost perpendicular fashion to their plane. These helices are also ordered in an antiparallel fashion and connected with loops of varying size. The charged side chains of the protein are exposed to the aqueous environment. The loops, of course, are also largely made up of hydrophilic amino acids. It was in a 1982 conference in Sicily that Hartmut Michel presented the X-ray diffraction pattern of a crystal of large complex of polypeptide chains which constitute photosynthetic reaction center from this bacterium Rhodopseudomonas viridis. Later 2.5 angstrom resolution data was also obtained by him in collaboration with Hans Diesenhofer and Robert Huber. Robert Huber was awarded Nobel Prize. The protein has non-identical subunits of about 300 residues and contains 4 chlorophyll molecules, 4 other pigments and 1 non-heme iron. The photosynthetic center has 1187 amino acid residues. The membrane spanning part has 11 alpha helices forming a 45 angstrom long cylinder with hydrophobic exterior. An interesting finding has been that even in such proteins, the buried amino acids are hydrophobic. However, the exterior membrane exposed amino acids are also, if anything, even more hydrophobic. The surfaces of the proteins are designed keeping in mind the polarity or non-polarity of their milieu. We also mentioned that there are third kind of proteins which are called lipid linked proteins. These are the proteins in which the bonds between the proteins and lipids are covalent in nature. Generally, palmitic acid and myristoyl acids are linked to membrane proteins. Myristoylation with the C14 saturated fatty acids occurs in the N-terminal glycine. Such proteins occur in cytosol, endoplasmic reticulum, plasma membrane and even nucleus. Another kind of lipid linked proteins are proteins in which the palmitoylation, that means the C16 saturated fatty acid, is linked to the proteins. In this case, the linkage is via a thioester linkage to specific cysteines in the proteins. Such proteins have more exclusive or limited existence and they are only found on the cytoplasmic phase of plasma membranes where they are involved in signaling mechanisms. Apart from this, proteins are also farnesylated or geranylated. These prenylations also occur normally at the cysteine residues of the proteins and again via a thioester linkage. GPI linkages are more common in parasitic protozoa but do occur in all eukaryotes. These are located on the exterior of the plasma membranes. So to summarize, in this module we learnt about early ideas about role of membranes and its proteins, 3 different kinds of membrane proteins, structures of glycophorin, bacteriorhodopsin and photosynthetic reaction center. We also learnt about the lipid linked proteins. Single or multiple helix bundles are not the only ways transmembrane domains of integral proteins are organized. Porins, the gatekeeper in membranes which allow entry of necessary nutrients in the cell, contain transmembrane beta barrels. We will look at that when we talk of the membrane transport. Electron microscopy contributed very much to our understanding of membrane proteins in these proteins which were found to be difficult to crystallize. The X-ray diffraction picture of the photosynthetic reaction center, when presented in that conference, was the first X-ray diffraction study of membrane proteins. Given that and its complex structure and immense biological importance, actually made scientists listen to the presentation in pin drop silence. So science does have its exciting moments. Thank you.